Hello and welcome to the Personal Branding Podcast. I'm your host, Mary Henderson. Now, if you've ever wondered what makes a person stand out in a crowd, or what makes a person an authority in a niche or an industry, or a social media influencer, this podcast is for you. Today, I'm super excited to introduce to you JP Maroney, a hardcore entrepreneur who I'm sure will give us all a taste of what it takes to truly stand out and achieve optimum success in every area of your life. Now, JP is an American entrepreneur, an investor, a philanthropist with more than 26 years experience starting, building, buying and selling companies in publishing, media, advertising, software, e-commerce, textiles, training, real estate, and consulting. Oh my God, JP. He's the founder and CEO of Harbor City Capital, a global alternative investment group specializing in buying, building, and monetizing digital assets. JP, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
My God, you sound like like this, amazing. Like just that profile of you. It's like you've been there, done that, and I can already see that there are so many stories intertwined in all of that 26-year experience.
Yeah, it's funny because one of my mentors had a phrase that he's no longer with us, but he had a phrase I love. He said, "The things I do have been hammered out on the anvil of experience." That's my life.
Absolutely. So, JP, I'm excited to have you on this show because you are one guy that knows the true meaning of entrepreneurship. And really, I say that with total conviction. You understand media across all different platforms, old and emerging, which I think is really interesting. You see both sides of the coin. And I think I can even safely say, you're the godfather of real entrepreneurship and maybe even a little bit of old school, which I like. What I love about you, JP, from what I've read, is what you stand for. And it's obvious to me that you're family first and you genuinely care. It comes across in all of your content. Even your positioning on your website says it all to me. And let me read that. Your greatest journey is to search for, discover, and fulfill your unique purpose. So I want to start with that, JP, because this show is all about personal branding, and you clearly are an authority in the digital landscape. And to be an authority, you have to be living your unique purpose. So give us a short version of how JP actually became a brand, how you arrived where you are today and known in the marketplace as a guru in the digital landscape.
If I had to sum it up, I would say it starts with giving. I'm a big believer and I subscribe to the philosophy that the more you give, the more you get. But you got to give before you get. That's law. You can't get around that. And so when you think of branding, a lot of times you think of the window dressing, right? The packaging of a brand. But I think a brand proactively or accidentally becomes the core of who you are. And it's funny because I've asked people, I have a book that I've been working on outlining. It's in line behind some other stuff, but that I've been working on outlining behind this idea of giving and getting back, the idea of reciprocity. I've never had it fail me. And in client relationships, in fact, I've had guys comment to me later and say, it was neat because you got on the phone with me and it wasn't like you were trying to close me. It was you genuinely cared about the answers I was giving to the questions you asked, and you genuinely offered solutions with no strings attached. And I've always believed that if you approach life that way, if you approach business that way, then it's going to give you back in abundance far beyond anything you could ever give. And so I think a brand starts with the DNA of who you are as a person, who you are as a professional, what you have to give. And that starts with things like making inventory of what you have to give, right? And things we can talk about later, which is linking that up to a need in the marketplace.
Absolutely, JP. Um, it's interesting that you say that because, giving free content or advice away is how I approach my business. And I think that when you're building your personal brand, what you're saying resonates with me 100%. I think that where there has been a disconnect. I think also in the very much in the digital landscape, where a lot of people are selling this notion around high ticket, getting on a call and reading this prescription called a sales script. I don't prescribe to that, JP. I think that is it shows through. In some ways, it's a form of desperation. I'm a bit like you. I like to give a lot of content away for free, and it pays off. A client needs to, or a prospect needs to touch you at least 8 to 11 times, before they can actually start believing and trusting in you. And that all starts with a mindset of giving. The other thing is that I want to touch on is that you obviously understand media on all levels. That's your background. You've been in the publishing business, broadcasting, now digital, and you clearly understand this space. I'm talking about the media space and the fast changing digital landscape, more importantly. So I want to talk about the digital landscape, JP, but I specifically want to talk about the coaching industry and the shift that is happening right now. It seems to me that everyone's a guru. There are coaches teaching people that you don't need an expertise to be an authority, which I think is a bit of a problem. I've personally heard coaches selling this idea for $10,000 plus to vulnerable people. Facebook still, for the majority of coaches, is the go-to platform to generate leads, especially coaches selling high-ticket coaching services. But nothing's shifted in terms of what these coaches bring to the table, JP. And personally, I'm seeing a shift in what the client now wants. They don't want just another sales funnel. They want a lot of pain taken away from them because they're overloaded with so much noise and uncertainty. What are you seeing that is shifting in the digital marketing landscape? Can you just give us an overview from where you sit, because you've got 26 years of experience, plus you're in the thick of the digital transformation age right now. What are you seeing?
Well, it's not just coaching. You happen to be in that industry. I've done some coaching in the past. I've done a lot of high-end consulting over the years. And what the internet brings is the ability to inexpensively create a facade. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, the internet has made it easy to start up a business. But for people who want to be predatory, it allows them to create an image. Some might say a brand, but I don't really believe it's a brand. I believe it's a facade. But to create a brand or an image that they know what they're talking about and they're worth paying money to. And so people have to be very savvy to navigate that. I learned a long time ago that selling requires asking a lot of questions, helping the prospect figure out what it is they truly want, and then showing them how to get it. That's really all selling is about. And when you have these people that have figured out a way to craft what they call a strategy call or something like that to manipulate someone, as you said, vulnerable, into buying something because they're preying on their emotional side. Most people buy emotionally and then justify with logic. And
Yes.
so they're vulnerable if you hit the right buttons. If you don't think it's possible, just there's a guy out, I believe he's from the UK, called Darren Brown, who is an illusion guy and a hypnotist and all mentalist.
Yeah.
And has done some specials on Netflix. One of the more recent ones was called Push. And then he did another one more recently than that. But anyway, watching his stuff will give you proof that it is very much real with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, with hypnotic trances, and with certain psychological persuasion techniques to move someone to a decision that may not be in their best interest. I mean, one of my favorite books out there is a book called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
book talks about commitment and consistency and other sort of magical techniques that you can use scientifically to apply to your persuasion. And I've always said, great persuaders, great salesmen, saleswomen, persuaders, great persuaders walk a very fine line between salesmanship and con, right? Because you could go either way. If you're good at persuading people, you could do it for their good, or you could do it only for your good. I believe
Absolutely.
that's very short-lived, and if you're going to play a long game, eventually it's going to catch up with you. The other beauty of the internet and social media is that news travels really fast. And so
Absolutely.
if someone is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, if someone is good at closing but not good at delivering, that's going to come out eventually, and the market will discover it. So there
Absolutely.
may be some carcasses along the way, right, of people that they've done wrong, but in the end, it'll come back to them. And I believe karma. I mean, I believe it's going to come back. I believe the way you treat people and the way you interact with people, ultimately, whether it's some magnetic force or it's just the fact that you do that long enough, it comes back around to you. However you believe, I believe that ultimately you pay for the things that you push out on the world.
I think that sort of aligns with my thinking, in that if you're not 100% authentic from the moment that prospect speaks to you until they experience your content, you're in deep trouble, because that consistency, especially under the heading of personal branding, is 100% critical. It's absolutely everything. And what it converts to, from my standpoint, are raving fans. So, from the moment they see your content, to the moment they speak to you, to the moment they sign up, to the moment they're experiencing your digital content or your physical content, and experience micro transformations along the way, that has to all be congruent. I actually think, JP, that's not an easy thing to do when you're not coming from a place of who you truly are. If you're actually coming through as a facade, at some point that does break, and I think it breaks very early on, not later on in the, not a year down the track. It's weeks into the experience that starts cracking.
I want to address that specifically, because I've heard people for years say things like, and I've been around the personal development space for many years. It's what transformed me. I grew up no money. My father was a minister. My grandfather was a minister. We never had money. In fact, some people misinterpreted that scripture. Love of money is root of all evil, to make money the evil
Yes.
thing. And so I grew up, that wasn't a important thing. Anyway, in my early 20s, 18, 19 years old, I was first exposed to some new ideas of thinking. And in my early 20s, I really started to read books and listen to tapes and learn how to, create something from inside yourself that goes out. But I've heard people within the business and personal development and coaching space say what you just said about pursuing your passion and being authentic and all of that. Let's not forget, there are guys that are billionaires that sell bolts and fasteners and rent.
Yes.
Some of them are my friends. They rent out storage buildings and stuff.
Sure.
That is not their passion. That is how they make their money. So I think there are certain businesses, coaching would be one of them, where you have to have a very organic concern and care for your audience, and that should come through in what you do and in your branding. And yet I think in other areas, not so much. It's a matter of what's more important. Something goes as far back as J. Paul Getty saying this years ago. is the true success in business comes from finding a need, and I say even more than that, finding a want, not just a need, because a lot of people need stuff they'll never buy, but finding a want in the market and then solving that problem. And I go a step further and I say that true success comes from finding an audience that is so hungry and so in pain that they would be willing to buy the formula to that solution written on a brown paper bag. And I have a whole story behind that, but the idea is that they're in so much pain that they don't care how it's packaged and branded, or they just need a friggin' solution. That's the ultimate thing to sell. Not everybody has the luxury of selling that, but that's the ultimate thing to sell. But you asked a question about the internet and trends or where the market's going. The one thing that really caught me after building business for so many years before I built my first website, or had my first website built, I'm trying to think, I want to say it was about 1994 or 5 for our 95, I guess it was, our magazine publishing company. And back in those days, it was, I think Front Page was the HTML editor, and you could build a website. Yes. So this is like way back. So dial-up days. And so I've been on the internet since the mid 90s. So I've been around a while, but it wasn't until 2004 that I made the move to pretty much building our companies 100% through the internet, with the exception of speaking engagements, things like that, but really using the internet as the driver. What I discovered, and this hasn't changed, this has intensified. I believe that the internet is the ultimate superior access vehicle to your target market. It is the ultimate machine for lead generation and client acquisition. With Harbor City, I built an entire business model and an entire investment strategy around the idea of lead generation and client acquisition. I believe that's where the big win is. Never before have we ever had a way to proactively and accurately target the perfect buyer on a global basis, but down to a micro level of one person, and speak to one person in the way we can with the internet. Wally Waddles years ago said, he was an advertising guy, he said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. I just can't figure out which half. And that's the way everybody used to feel. Well, in the digital space, you no longer have to feel that way, because every penny, every click, every view, every opt-in, every registration, every lead, every purchase, every follow-up, every web page visit is trackable down to an IP address of who that is, what they are, what else they've done, what other sites they've been on, how long they've been on those sites, if they're male or female, and what their age is, and on and on and on. So it's taken a lot of the guesswork out of targeting of clients. And I think that's, when you ask me what's the big aha for me, or the big trend, it's the ability to access markets, if you know how or have a relationship with someone like Harbor City, to be able to access markets in scale and at velocity.
You know, JP, that's interesting that what you just said, because I spend a lot of time on Facebook advertising and, creating sales funnel after sales funnel, testing, split testing, you name it, I did it. And, it just wasn't working for me. But what I realized is that it's not that there was something wrong with my sales funnel, my content. It's just that my audience did not live on Facebook, and it only took me, a couple of, thousands of dollars and a lot of time to figure that out. But the learning was not lost. The learning did not go to waste. The learning was unbelievably valuable because I got the opportunity to understand how the algorithm worked. I worked with some pretty smart people that understood the Facebook algorithm, and it was just an extraordinary learning. Then I transitioned over to LinkedIn. I took all that learning and literally, and I kid you not, my life changed overnight. I mean, my organic engagement for most of my posts is crazy. I mean, just in the last 24 hours, one of my videos got 300 likes, 145 comments, and 12,000 views in 24 hours. That's all organic. From that, that generated a lot of new connections. And I just woke up this morning and I have about 18 messages. Okay. Now, on a week to week basis, I generate about 10 to 12 face to face meetings with my target audience. And this is all organic, JP. And I think that what I've been able to do, and I think this is what you're saying as well, is that the content that I'm creating is so specific to the target audience that I'm targeting. And I think that for me is what we now call social selling. It's another way to sell to your target audience. That's not selling. You're actually going back to your word, giving, and adding massive value. You're educating them along the way so that you can become believable and you can become trustable. In your view, is this where we're heading? Is this important? How are you seeing change? Or no, let me ask you a better question. How do we future-proof our careers and businesses in this digital transformation age that we're living in?
I tell people that at Harbor City, and this includes the companies we own in our portfolio.
Yes.
But I tell people at Harbor City, we need to be platform agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
You rightfully, I mean, I'm not saying that, because you and I have never discussed who your target audience is. I'm not saying, and even I'm not convinced yet, because I haven't looked at it, that your audience isn't on Facebook. But you discovered that and you abandoned that and went to LinkedIn because you didn't get married to the platform. You said,
Yes.
I'm open to go wherever the market is, right?
Correct.
There was a guy, I'm trying to think of his name. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, there's an old story about a bank robber. They asked, he said, why did you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. And, so you go where the audience is. And we do that. We're not married to a platform. We're completely platform agnostic. So we'll look wherever the audience for that particular offer is that we're running. So I think that's number one, is to fundamentally be that way, right? That means that as the market shifts 2 years from now, I mean, we've seen, I'll probably pay for this at some point. We've seen Microsoft mess up a few things along the way that they've bought. They may, and I'm seeing some really neat things I like recently on LinkedIn. So they may actually be going in the right direction. But they may screw it up, or there just may be a better thing come along in 2 years.
Yes.
And LinkedIn diminish in value and diminish in eyeballs. And so if your entire business model is wrapped up in acquiring clients through that platform, and you have do not have the ability to pivot quickly, then you could get caught in a squeeze there. So I think remaining open-minded and constantly trying new means and new platforms, number one. And number two is to maintain that philosophy we talked about of fundamentally how you acquire clients, which is giving first and using attraction marketing to bring them to you. Well, that'll work pretty much anywhere, right? That works if you're in a mixer somewhere with 100 people with cocktails and you're walking around, and instead of running around vomiting your pitch for your company on everybody, you're asking questions about them and showing genuine interest, and then saying, you know what, I actually think I have an idea about how you could fix that or whatever, and actually telling them that.
Yes.
So I think that, maintaining a position that you're willing to go wherever the market goes, and maintaining a position that you're willing to serve the market at a very fundamental level will help you maintain relevance forever.
Well, what sort of trends are you seeing? What are you seeing that has changed dramatically in the last 2 years across all platforms? I mean, let's just talk about the main ones. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. What are you seeing that's changing, that's working, that's not working? What's your view?
attention is at a premium,
Yeah.
and it's expensive. I mean, you have to buy attention on these platforms. I realize what you're doing is at a organic level, but in order to scale, and I'm talking about companies that want to
Yes.
generate 10,000, 50,000 leads a week kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
In
Yes.
order to do that, you have to put dollars behind it. And that's what I was going to ask you is if you've done this organically and you're seeing this success, have you put
Yes.
any paid ads in or any accelerant into what you're doing at LinkedIn, or are you retargeting those people off of LinkedIn that engage on LinkedIn? Are you doing anything to add an accelerant to what's working organically? Because I think that's where the real win is to be able to find an audience. So for example, we're able, because remember I said everything's trackable, right? So in Facebook, LinkedIn, all these different platforms, even around the web on Google, you're able to sort of put without getting into technical jargon
Yeah.
make it easy for everyone. You're able to sort of put a bookmark or a marker on everyone that watches a video, visits a
Yeah.
page, etc. People call it cookies, IP tracking, different things, right? But you're able to sort of build. In the old days, to build a list, in the old days, we had a Rolodex, right? A card thing.
Yeah.
Then we got
Yeah.
into CRMs, and
Yes.
then we got into email lists. So
Yes.
it's the same thing. It's a list. And I've always said the gold is in the list. Well, nowadays, you don't even have to ask their permission, so to speak, to put them into an audience. By
Yes.
them viewing a video, even in consuming a certain percentage of a video. So like we have certain
Yes.
targeting that if someone views more than 50 or 75 or whatever percent of a video, then we continue to put other messages that are relevant in front of them, because we know that they showed enough interest to consume that much of the early content.
Sure.
But that puts them into a pool, so to speak, of people that you can continuously market to. To me, that's, if you were to think globally, because each platform has major trends that are happening. But if you were to
Yes.
think globally, what's the big trend or aha? I love the idea that we can build an audience of people and then continuously market to those people. Okay, go back to the fundamentals of advertising. Different people have said different numbers, from 7 to 12 or more, that it takes exposing someone to your marketing message anywhere from 7 to 10 or 12 times before they'll act on that
Yeah.
prompt, right? I often say it like this. I say people learn in layers. So over our lifetime, we have all these different layers of stuff we've learned, and then someone asks us a
Yeah.
question, and we answer that question fluently, and they go, "My God, how'd you learn all that?" Well, it didn't happen in one place. It was layers, right?
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
believe that people buy in layers. So it's
Yes.
building
Yes.
those
Very good point.
layers of trust, because we've all heard people say, well, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. That's not just a cliche. That's true. There has to be enough trust built up to where
Mhm.
they feel that you're not going to exploit them, or that you're not going to take advantage, or you're not going to con them, or you're not going to rip them off, or
Sure.
whatever that is, or that it's just worth their time to interact with you. And so being able to build an organic, not organic, that's not the word, build a thriving and growing audience of people that you can then put a message back in front of, even if they haven't gotten on your email list or followed
Yes.
you on Facebook. To me,
Yes.
that is a power play, because there are 4 platforms. LinkedIn is not on this list, but we'll talk about that separately. But when you think mass audience, consumer audiences, Facebook, Google, including the content network, Twitter, and Taboola. Between the 4 of those, if you retarget, you can cover about 98% of the web. And so when you think about the fact that a lot of companies, like I deal with companies, they might have 500,000 or 20,000 customers on their list that have already bought from them. We can upload or inject those audiences into the email address and phone numbers into these platforms and be able to put ads and messages in front of those people to get them to come back again and again and again, as well as anyone that visits their page, anyone that watches their videos, anyone that does it, retarget them. So that's the big win, is to build an ever-growing audience that you can put your message in front of. And here is why. Let me explain. It's not just to say I've got the biggest audience.
Right.
I've been teaching this for years, and I believe this. I teach this to our people that work with us and people that we consult with. I believe in what I call the carousel concept. I believe that all of your prospects are on a carousel going around. So imagine a carousel going around and around and around. And you're standing there in one place, and they keep passing you and passing you. And you go, hey, you want my deal? And as they go around, about 3 to 7% of the market is really ready to buy right now. And if your deal looks good to them, they'll go ahead and hop off the carousel and give you some money, right? But the rest of them are still on the carousel going around and around and around.
Yep.
And then at some point, their needs change, or their level of trust and bonding with you changes, whatever that might be. Let's say you sell investments and they don't have any money to invest, but the third or fourth time around the carousel, their mother passes away and they inherit a bunch of money. Now they have money to invest. They've been watching you, and if you've done your job, think about this audience we talked about building, whether they're on an email list or retargeting list, all of the above, etc. If you've done your job, every time the carousel passed, or they passed you on the carousel, you gave some more. Gave some more content, gave some more content. They watched another podcast interview. They watched another video on LinkedIn. They got an email in and they read, and man, that's really interesting. This person knows what the heck they're talking about. So all that trust and bonding is building up, so that when they come around and the trust and bonding, the need, the moment, everything intersects at the right moment, and they get off and they give you money. That's real marketing, because all of life is like that carousel, and people will stay on that carousel and keep going around as long as you keep them in that audience. And
Absolutely.
but you can't, Seth Godin wrote a good book called The Purple Cow, right? And he talked about, he said, the fact if you're driving down the road, you see a cow, you go, there's a cow, and you drive, you see another cow, By the third or fourth or fifth cow, you quit noticing the cows because they all look alike. But all of a sudden you go, a purple cow? I noticed that, right? Because it's different. So if you were just standing there beside the carousel, think about it. Just standing there beside the carousel, and you're on your cell phone checking your text messages or whatever, and these people are going around, they might see you the first time, but then they're going to ignore you. They don't care. You have nothing to give to them. So they could be on your audience and your carousel, but if you're not sending them emails, if you're not presenting materials back out in the retargeting, if you're not giving and giving and giving, well, then they forget that you exist. They're on the list, but they don't care anymore. But if you're doing your job, then every time they're coming around, you're throwing a headline up in front of them that resonates with them, and then you're giving them value and content. That's how you win the game.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, JP, to be successful, what would you say what are the three things that every person listening to this podcast must implement today, regardless of whether they're starting out, whether they're going through major adversity, which you've been through, whether they're successful? What are the three things that every single person, including myself, listening to this podcast today, what do they need to do immediately? You've just, I think, touched on the social side and what's required in terms of nurturing your audience. What other three things can you share with us?
We're specifically talking about people in business, right?
Yeah, and I'm even going to go even more specific, people that are building their personal brand. I think let's just go back to that topic, because people that are listening to this are building their personal brand. So when you're looking at a personal brand, we're talking about people that want to position themselves as an authority or are an authority in their niche. What are the three things that people need to be implementing today?
I'm going to go back to what I call my triple threat, okay? And
Yes.
we didn't actually work out these questions in advance. So I
No.
like the idea that you asked this question, and what I'm about to say is perfectly aligned. It's what I believe in. I've been teaching it for years and living it. And it's important that you get the order right. Okay. So the
Mhm.
sequence matters in this triple threat. It's
Excellent.
first market, second message, third monetization.
Hmm.
If you're going to be successful in business, you have to have a group of people that has a pain that is so agonizing that and a group of people with money who are willing to pay to fix the problem.
Yeah.
You could have people that are in a lot of pain, but they don't have the money, and unless you're a nonprofit, you're not going to build a business, right? So you could go out there and fix
Absolutely.
people's problem and not get paid for it. So they have
Hmm.
to have, there has to be, and preferably as large of an audience as possible, or at least large enough to sustain the business and the lifestyle you're trying to create. So I think it's really important that you understand what kind of business you're trying to create from the beginning anyway, right? You may be trying to build
Absolutely.
a singular one or two or three woman man show, um, where you're a coach or consultant or a personal brand delivering some value, content, training, etc. Or you could be trying to build an empire. And those are different things, and they require different skill sets, and they require different steps. But fundamentally, they both require an audience of people that are hungry and in pain and frustrated and ready to get out of that pain and willing to exchange money for it. And the more
Yeah.
you know about that audience, so like we could spend, if like literally we could go 3 days or 3 weeks on this topic, because I could take you. I should do this. I never thought about that. We should do a 3 day workshop where day one is on market, day two is on message, and day
Yeah.
three is on monetization. Because it's really, when you think about market, you need to know who they are, what they listen to, what they read, what websites they go to,
Yes.
what's
Yes.
important to them. Not only what pain they have, but how do they articulate that pain when
Yes.
they say it in their head? What are they saying? Because good marketing, and you can write this down, good marketing enters the conversation going on in the mind of the prospect. That means that
Hmm.
whatever you're saying in your market must resonate with them, or they're going to ignore it. It's got to stop them in their tracks, and they go, that's me, or else they're going to pass you on. So you got to have a good market that's in pain, that has money and the willingness to pay that money to solve the problem. Number two is you have to have a message that resonates with them. I talked on that, but that's more than just headlines. That's where I believe it comes back fundamentally to giving. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, if I speak in front of an audience, I should, because I've done over 2,500 live presentations on the stage. I've done over 1,000 webinars. And I've had people that have asked me or said, oh, I can't get up and give them my best stuff because then they won't want to buy from me. And I always say to them, if you can tell everybody everything you know in an hour, then you
Yes.
really don't have much to give. And
Brilliant.
so I believe that whatever amount of time you have with someone, like you told me we had 30 minutes, we've been going 40.
Yes.
But I believe that if you have a certain amount of time with someone, you give and you give and you give, and then you dig deeper and you find something else to give. If that comes through in your messaging, you're going to
Yes.
attract people magnetically to you.
Of
So
course.
your message has to be on point, and I believe your message has to be pushed out organically as you've been doing, and I believe you have to use accelerants. Think about a Facebook page, for example. Only about 5 to 15% of your followers will ever see your message organically
Yeah.
because of the algorithm. So either
Hmm.
you have to be willing to settle for that, which is kind of crazy, or you have to put paid dollars behind it. And people go, wait a minute, I got followers and now I got to spend money to get them to see my message? Yes, you do. It's just the sheer volume. Remember what I said, attention comes at a price. And
Yes.
so you have to be willing to pay that price. So the first is market, number two is message, then comes monetization. And what that means is you create a product or a solution, a service that you're going to take money for that perfectly solves that problem in your way, however it is. It may be a piece of software that you developed. It might be a worksheet a checklist. It could be a consulting or coaching pattern that you walk them through, and it could be a service that you do work for them on. It doesn't matter. But you have to, number one, find out what the market wants and what their pain is, and craft your message so that it gets their attention. And then and only then can you sell them that product and get money in exchange for that.
Right.
Here's so let's take the opposite. You said, what should people do? Here's what a lot of people do, unfortunately, and I run across them all the time. They start at the end. They create a product, a solution, a widget, they write a book, they create a course, and then they go, I wonder who would buy this. And they wonder why they're broke. Well, it's because you got it all backwards. You can't start at the solution and then try to find the market. Go find the hot, angry, frustrated, painful market, and with a huge problem. That's the difference between those two is so far apart that I often liken it to this. If you create the product and then go try to find the audience, it's like going out in the desert and drilling for water. It's
Yes.
a lot of work, it's expensive, and it's time consuming, and maybe you might find water. Finding a market first and then creating a solution is like going out in a rushing, gorgeous, amazing river stream with crystal clear water, taking a bucket, dipping it down in the water and lifting it back up and taking a sip. Pure, clean refreshment. That's how far apart those two ideas are. So it's market, message, monetization, and in that order.
Oh, that's just gold. That's right there, what you've just expressed. Anyone listening to this should be writing down notes. Absolutely. So, JP, I want to end it on this note, and I want to ask you one final question. If you could meet one person who's no longer living, who would it be, and what would you ask them, or what would you want to know?
Wow, I wish you'd give me this one in advance. A person who's no longer living.
Mm-hmm.
And what would I ask them?
What would you ask, or what would you want to know? It's a hard one, isn't it?
Wow, that is a great question. I mean, so let me go stream of thought with you for a second and see if I can come to a conclusion. You can edit this down if you want or not.
Okay.
So stream of thought, the first that occurred to me was Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
One was because Benjamin Franklin was so committed to innovation, but the other was Benjamin Franklin was so committed to personal improvement as well. I don't know if you're familiar with all of his things. He came up with, I believe it was 13 areas that he wanted to improve in his life, and he worked on one of them a week for 13 weeks and then started over and cycled through them. I built an entire business around a model around that, what I call my 13-week power cycle in terms of introducing products and ideas to customers. Yes. But it's really neat. It's funny because he said one of those ideas was humility, and he threw it out because he could never manage that one. But Benjamin Franklin is someone I read when I was a very young kid. I had those books that my parents subscribed to, the little thin hardback books that you got on a subscription basis. And one of them was Innovators, one was Sports Authorities. There were like 5 or 6 different series that I would get. Came with the little plastic bookends holder that you had. So I remember reading those books, and Benjamin Franklin was someone that always was extremely fascinating to me. I'm going to go with that answer and just stick with it for now.
That's a fantastic answer. And JP, what type of people should connect with you, and how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to really scale, like we work mainly with companies that are doing, 3 to 5 million, all the way up to 50, 100 million plus. I mean, we work with big lenders and the mortgage refinance leads and all that. But here's the deal. Regardless the size of your business, If you're looking for a predictable, reliable flow of new customer leads, you want to know how that would happen to create a process for where you and or your salespeople or your team or whatever could wake up every morning and their calendars are full, or you never want for new business. Like we started this year, let me give you we eat our own dog food. So we started this year with $164 million worth of leads on order in our order pipeline. That's
Oh
people who
my
had already
God.
said, we want to do business with you. This is what we'll pay you,
Yes.
etc. So if you would like to be able to wake up every day with more business than you could possibly handle, we're good guys to talk to. The other is if you're an investor or you're at or nearing retirement and you've got money set aside, you've got a retirement, and you're looking for a place to put that money to work that's predictable and reliable. We've been breaking the rules for 5 years. We've generated double-digit annual returns for our investors, and we just introduced a bond. No one's ever done this. We just introduced a 2-year bond that pays 1.5% a month in current income to your bank account for 24 consecutive months with the principal back at the end of 2 years. So it's 18% a year in annual yield, but it's paid monthly. No one's done that. In the last 7 days, we had 109 people, as of before this interview, 109 people that have requested those bond documents since we opened that offering a week ago.
Brilliant.
So we expect that to sell out very quickly, but we're going to have additional rounds. Our business model is that we raise capital and we invest that money into generating leads on the internet for growing companies. We turn the capital 4 times a year, and we make very good returns, very good margins on our money, and therefore we pay out a nice return to investors. That's our whole model. We essentially turned lead generation into an alternative asset class. And so it's exciting. I'd love for people to just learn our story. So connect with
Yeah.
me. You can go to harborcity.com. You can go to jpmaroney.com. I'm JP Maroney in almost every platform out there. Love for you to connect. And I love to talk business, whether it's a podcast interview or a hot seat or a client. Doesn't matter. I love to talk business. So people are welcome to reach out.
JP, you're a legend. That's all I have to say. I'm so honored that you accepted my invitation. This by far is one of the best interviews I've done. And, I've watched you over, a long time on Facebook, and you're always posting stuff. But I have to tell you, the song did it for me. So you're a family man. You're a really good guy, and connect with JP. He knows what he's talking about. I wouldn't be interviewing him if he didn't know this space. So JP, thank you so much.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks.